Oh, happy Valentine's Day, everybody. Hope you're spoiling your significant other or maybe yourself. Some chocolate, maybe a heart sticker, a lot of hoops. Hopefully you stayed up last night. We here at the Gauer Hour, we love everyone in college basketball. Every team, every player. Nary a bad thought. Rob Joyce, Megan Gower. Megan, did you wake up to flowers and chocolate? What are our plans today for Valentine's Day?
I did not, but my boyfriend's not here. I'm actually going to a concert with my mom and sister tonight, so I'm ditching him. So
very romantic. What's your favorite chocolate or your favorite sweet? Not everyone likes.
I'm more of a gummy candy girl, so I'm a big fan of like a Haribo gummy bear. Really, any kind of Haribo candy. I'm very happy.
You like the ones with like the sour gummies?
Yeah,
like the sour worms.
Yeah.
Sweetheart Hearts. That's where it's at for me. They were 99 cents at the store yesterday, so
ooh, nice.
Yeah, might grab some. Loaded show today. A ton of top 10 games to recap and preview. Like an amount I didn't even really process until last night. The SEC is a race, folks. Big Ten is a race, folks. And later on, we're going to head to maybe the wildest conference race of all. Going into the weekend, we have a three-way tie for first in the Big 12. K-State, TCU, Baylor, all square atop the standings. Oklahoma State, Utah, they're only a game back. So 5 teams realistically in the Big 12 race. And we're bringing in an expert to break it down, Rachel Galligan, the Big 12 analyst. She'll join the show in a little bit, but we got to start last night. Going into UCLA, USC, I wanted to start our conversation with Texas. And then Juju Watkins almost single-handedly beat the undefeated number 1 team in the country. Best performance by a player this year in any game, bar none.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've said it's really hard to beat this USC game when Juju plays a game at, her top level. And then this was just another level. I mean, I forget what it was, over 30 points. I think it was 34 total, maybe 38 total. But I just thought in particular, like her first half, like USC really couldn't do anything, and it outside of Juju, and it didn't matter because she just absolutely took over that game for the entire first half of it, and then down the stretch as well, not just with scoring, but on the defensive end. I feel like she had like 10 blocks in the last 5 minutes of that game.
She only had 8 points in the fourth quarter, but she had 4 for 5 assists in the fourth quarter. She had at least 4 or 5 blocks in the fourth quarter. And she's a big guard, but she's still a guard. Like, you don't see in this fashion, she's 6'2". You don't see guards take over like this. Like, sure, Lauren Betts has put together lines where, like Maryland, she was like, 30-something, 15, and I think it was Baylor, actually. She had 9 blocks. We've seen 6'7" forwards do this before. I can't remember a time I saw a guard be that dominant defensively.
Yeah, no, it was just such an impressive performance. And like when USC really needed stops down the stretch, like Juju was the one there getting them for them.
A 24-8 fourth quarter. The script was there for USC really the whole game. Like, obviously Juju playing well hides a lot of other things, but the defense was swarming. They forced a bunch of turnovers. I thought in the third quarter when it looked like UCLA was going to maybe pull away, like had shades of South Carolina, Texas, and Columbia, where like the game plan was there, and then they didn't execute well enough. And then Juju just decided, that doesn't matter what everyone else is doing. We're not losing the game. What does this do now from a 1 seed standpoint? Because now you're looking at 5 teams and there's only 4 1 seeds.
Yeah, I think USC is the team I have out of that group right now, but it's so close between them and Texas at the moment. And I wouldn't count LSU out either. I think they still have some big games to play, and if they pick up some wins, they can put themselves in that conversation. But I do feel like it's that group of 5 that is the main contenders. I think Texas has like the smallest edge over USC right now, and it's the Iowa loss that's hurting USC in that comparison.
Are we, I don't want to be a prisoner of the moment. I also don't vote on things. Does this put Juju in a National Player of the Year race for you? Because I know for some, I saw a lot of people saying it does.
Yeah, I mean, I think she's already part of it, right? Like, I know she hasn't been the top name, but like, I don't think you can have a best player in the country conversation without including her in it. I still think it's 1 game, so like Betts and Hidalgo still have the edge to me, but like I think she's part of that conversation for sure.
What are your takeaways from UCLA? Like, honestly, I don't have that many. Like, the sky is not falling for me from UCLA. They just, like, they didn't play that well. Like, USC didn't let them play that well on the road. I still think UCLA and South Carolina, despite both losing this week, are, the two best teams in the country.
Yeah, I agree with
The
that.
gap isn't as big as we thought.
Yeah. The only thing that concerns me for UCLA was just their inability to execute kind of down the stretch, which is one game, and they just haven't been in that situation, right? This team hasn't really been tested, so it's honestly probably better for them in the long run to be in that situation and have it not go their way, but to at least be in that situation. I only say that it concerns me because I think we've seen in the past, this UCLA team has been not this good, but really good for quite a few seasons, and I think we've seen them struggle in late game moments a lot in that spread. So that's the one thing that worried them for me, because it felt like to me down the stretch, Lauren Best just didn't touch the ball enough. They went away from what makes them so good.
She's getting blocked by Juju. That's why.
Yeah. Partially that, but it was, you got to play through your best player, right? You can't go away from that game plan.
I haven't dug into the numbers, so this is purely anecdotal. Last year against LSU, couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. Last night, 2 of 13. I think it's more of an outlier that Jaquez and Jones and Rice and Tamia Gardner, they all didn't play well. And the odds of that happening, now it only needs to happen once in March. It's no best of 7, no best of 5. It only needs to happen once. I feel like the odds of that happening are smaller. So, yeah, I'm not wholly hitting the panic button. I'm much more impressed with the defensive effort from USC than I am worried about the offense of UCLA. The turnovers, shockingly, you'll be shocked. Turnovers, they weren't an issue for UCLA this year, but they're not an issue. That's their one thing. They don't always take care of the ball. 20 turnovers last night. You know me. I like people who take care of the ball. And UCLA, if you're looking to nitpick, UCLA doesn't always do that, and they got last night.
Yeah, and I don't know, as good as this team has been, I didn't feel like they were going to get through the regular season undefeated. USC on the road is about as good as a loss as you can have. So the sky's certainly not falling. I don't think too much of it for UCLA, other than just hoping that maybe they find some other opportunities in the regular season to get tested down the stretch so that they're ready when that comes in March.
You and I both don't care. In fact, we have a bracket reveal Sunday that'll consider this moot. Who's the number 1 team in the country on Monday?
It's a good question. It should
Notre
be
Dame's
UCLA
2.
or
Texas is 3 and South Carolina's 4.
I think the answer of who's going to be the number 1 team in the bracket reveal and who's going to be the number 1 team in the AP poll are very different answers. Yes. The AP poll is probably going to be Notre Dame because that's how the AP poll operates, even though that makes no sense. Anyway, the bracket reveal, I think it's UCLA. It's splitting hairs between UCLA and South Carolina at this point. I could see either one being the top overall seed. I'm leaning UCLA, but I won't be surprised if it's South Carolina.
Yeah. I don't want to rag too much on AP poll voters. It's Texas is above South Carolina this week, and I understand they just beat them Sunday by possession.
But it forgets about the game that happened.
Right, where South Carolina beat them by more than 1 possession. Beat them by, Texas doesn't shoot threes, 9 possessions. Let's talk Texas. 2 top 10 wins. South Carolina, obviously the most impressive on Sunday. And then they did, frankly, what I thought they would do to Kentucky, who will not be a top 10 team come Monday after an 0-2 week for the Wildcats. You can win, apparently. We've been talking all year. Can Texas win without shooting the 3? Sure. Yeah, clearly. You can. Because if you can beat South Carolina without making a 3, sure. Why can't you beat anyone else?
Yeah, still worries me as a long-term game plan in March. You have to win more than 1 game in March, right? It's a string of games.
Yeah, but I feel beat everyone else.
Yeah, I know. But I feel having that in your wheelhouse is just it gives you another way to win. I think without that, you have one way to win, and if that plan doesn't go according to plan, like we saw in the first game against South Carolina, things can unravel quickly.
Yeah, but can't you say that about
most teams? Yes.
Most teams in different, varying ways.
Yeah.
LSU has, maybe the best trio in the country, and unless they're playing Tennessee and Kalen Gilbert's playing, not much else. You can go down the list. Notre Dame.
Yeah.
They rely on the 3 more than most. Yeah. So Texas's thing is they just have no discernible desire to shoot the ball more than 12 feet away from the basket. What are your takeaways from Sunday? Outside of the fact that they won without taking a 3, which is mind-boggling. It's unusual for South Carolina to not be able to just frankly stop someone down low. Like Don Staley said, Kitts and Edwards were benched in the fourth quarter because they couldn't stop Kyla Oldacre. And you don't hear that from South Carolina. First time they've really missed Watkins.
Yeah, agreed. And I know we've talked a little bit about the Watkins injury and just the fact that like the South Carolina front court is not like the South Carolina front court of the last however many years when they've had Asia Wilson or Aaliyah Boston or Camille Cardoso down there. So I think you just saw that a little bit more in this game. I think we've also said like, yeah, that's the case, but like how many teams in the country can actually make you pay for it? And it's a very short list. But I think we saw that Texas is one of those teams and they were able to kind of have their way inside. Maybe similar to what Lauren Betts was able to do, for example, in like that early season loss for South Carolina as well. So I think we've seen that, like, we've talked about how they're more reliant on their guards. Like, if their guards can't make shots down the stretch and stuff like that, you're vulnerable to that kind of loss when you can't get the stop on the other end.
No, they made up for it yesterday. They hit, for South Carolina, a lot of threes and a blowout over Florida. Tina Pow looked really good last night. So, yeah, South Carolina is fine. I'd be interested. It's a 3-horse race in the SEC. LSU is still lurking there. They have one loss, so they're still in the conversation. They play Texas on Sunday. We'll preview that in a little while. I'd be interested. South Carolina won at home. Texas won at home. What happens if we get round 3 in Greenville?
Yeah.
Because Texas has largely played the same way twice. And one time they just didn't make shots, and the second time they made enough to win. Mm-hmm. And then last night against Kentucky, like Kentucky has one way to beat you. And Georgia Amore was inefficient. They got Clara Stack in foul trouble in the first half, and off. Yeah. On we go.
Yeah.
Wasn't a game.
I don't think that this one was surprising. I think we've kind of said for a few weeks now that like Kentucky's upcoming schedule, like they're probably going to come back to earth a little bit, and I think this was just the start of that.
I think Monday was the start of it when they lost to Ole Miss. And you just saw it by the fourth quarter. Ole Miss just wore them down. They hung around for a half with Texas, and then Texas just wore them down. They're just more physically imposing. Taylor Jones is a weapon. Like, it's weird. Most 6'6" post players are focal points, whether it's Jones or Oldacre, but you're so worried about Harmon and Booker that getting to the rim that you just kind of isolate those two. And like when you isolate a 6'6" person, like more times than not, you're going to lose.
Yeah.
That battle. Whether they have the ball in their hands or it's just can you box me out? No, I'm 6'6". You can't box me out, and I'm going to get the ball. So yeah, they're just built different than everyone else in a unique way as well. Like we've seen players be tall and have size. They're generally the focal point. And with Texas, they're not.
Yeah.
Ole Miss isn't starting to impress me. Like last year was probably too much too soon after the 16 run. And then, this year they came close a couple times and nearly beat Texas, nearly beat Oklahoma. Now they did get someone in Kentucky.
Yeah. No, I thought this was a good win for them. And I feel like they got like the Iowa State treatment last year. They had this big win in the tournament and over Stanford, and then like everyone made a big deal of them coming into the season, and then they weren't quite ready for it. And they were more ready for it than maybe Iowa State was this year, but similar situation. And now this year, I think they're better than last year's team. I still think there's a ceiling in terms of like they're probably not going to knock off a South Carolina, a Texas,
I agree,
an LSU, but they're going to make a hard game with everyone, and they're going to get some of these top 15 type games.
I agree with that. I will say, did you see any of that game on Monday?
I did not, no.
Coach Yo last year, if you remember, she ranted about the fan support. Yeah, she needs to re-rack it. Top 10 opponent in the building on a Monday night. It was empty. It was empty. Folks, support your team. I know they currently aren't ranked. They will be. Are they ranked? They will be next week. It doesn't matter. Yeah. They will be next week. They're a good program. What else are you doing on a Monday night in the Grove? Come on. Be better. All right, other Thursday results. Now, I didn't realize this game was on Peacock. I figured it was on Flow Sports or Baller TV or some made-up nonsense. Let's talk Richmond over St. Joe's. Not the greatest play of basketball I've ever seen, admittedly. Spiders win at home. What does it do for St. Joe's resume
now? It's not great. Like a win would have helped them. I still have like St. Joe's right there though. I think I just updated the bracket like 10 minutes ago. I think they're like the last team in at the moment. The bubble is, I've said this like 100 times, but it's very weak. So your second and third teams in both the A10 and the Ivy are just hanging out down there. So I don't know. It feels like the A10 could still be a 2-bid league. It's gonna be a close call, but a good win for Richmond, obviously, in terms of solidifying that. Like if Richmond doesn't win the A10 tournament, I still think they're making the field.
So would it be probably advantageous for the A10 if Richmond were to not win the A10 tournament?
Yeah.
So, okay, let's talk bubble. Is there a bubble? Like, I'm looking at your last four in, your first four out, updated as of 8:38 Valentine's Day morning. If you're telling me that Washington and Arizona are among the first four out, like, I understand there's lots of metrics that the committee uses. From the eye test, like, there's a massive difference to me between Iowa State, Virginia Tech, even Harvard, and Washington.
Yeah, no, there definitely is. It's a very, very weak bubble. Every week I get to like the 10th seeds, and I'm like, one, I don't want to put half these teams into the field that are in it. But it's just the resumes at the bottom and by the eye test as well are very weak.
Like, I feel like we can just like name our field now, and like barring some sort of catastrophic collapse,
right?
Like Washington they have 11 losses.
Yeah.
So does Arizona. They both have 11 losses. They're going to be at 13 loss teams. Washington's net is, I think it was in the 50s. Yeah, it's 52, and they're 14 and 11. And Arizona's net is 59, and they're 15 and 11. And it's like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Like, frankly, if you're gonna have someone like lose an auto bid that they're not supposed to, if you're asking me if I want 13 loss Arizona or Washington or South Dakota State, who has 3 quad 2 wins, which is more than West Virginia, Minnesota, Iowa State, Harvard, Nebraska, Virginia Tech. I want the Jackrabbits in the field. I want James Madison in the field. I understand that's not how the world works. That's not how the NCAA works. People are going to complain that, oh, my 10-loss team didn't make it. I feel aggrieved. Win more games.
Yeah.
We know what we also don't need to do? Expand the tournament.
No, please don't. We don't need to put all these teams that are down there right now, let alone more teams. I do think South Dakota State is one of those teams that if they don't win their conference tournament, they're safe. I don't see them being excluded. Yeah.
Give me Columbia. They got 3 quad 1, quad 2 wins. That's more than a bunch of these bubble teams, more than you think, more than teams that are safely in the field.
Yeah.
But again, that's not how the world works. They have all the resources in the world, and they still can't lose more than, fewer than 11 games, and they need to be in because, here we are. ACC last night. Pretty weird night in the ACC. NC State
is a weird night in the ACC.
Oh, that's fair. Didn't expect to watch the end of NC State Miami. Here I was after bedtime. Check my phone or reading stories. Like, what do you mean NC State and Miami's close? Get downstairs. What do you mean it's tied in the last minute? I had a whole thing ready and doing prep yesterday. How I did a 180 on NC State. Maybe I did a 140 on NC State.
Yeah.
Like 3-9 Miami. Canes did hit 10 threes. They shot well inside the arc too. Not the first time we've seen NC State play with its food. I don't want to overreact back the other way, but it was an eye-popping scoreline.
Yeah, agreed. Not a great game. Not a game you want to have close for NC State. At the same time, looking at their resume a fair amount last night, they've lost 1 game since November. And those November losses counted, but they were all good losses too. So I don't know. I feel like NC State's slowly just moving their way up, and you get the win, right? If it was a loss, it'd be a little bit more catastrophic, but you still found a way to win it.
Right. 14-point loss to South Carolina. That game was in Charlotte, right? That was neutral.
Mm-hmm.
A loss at TCU, which at the time it was oh, that's not a great loss. Well, that loss has aged well. LSU, that is a fine loss. And then West Coast trip. Every ACC team has generally struggled in one of the 2 West Coast games, and they lost at Cal by 7, made up for it by beating Stanford, and they haven't lost since. So yeah, again, I don't want to completely go back to early season, Rob, where it's NC State stinks. No, they're good. They just don't play with your food.
Yeah, they are flying. I feel very under the radar though. It's well, I guess they're ranked in the top 10 now, which I didn't even realize. But I feel no one's really talking about them. But they're quietly winning a lot of games.
Not quietly losing a lot of games. Georgia Tech wanted to host. Bye.
Yeah, that ship has sailed.
Lost. I had a whole thing ready about why Georgia Tech should be in favor to host. Then they, got by 11-13 Clemson. I'm sorry, now 12-13 Clemson because they won and not even lost, but like wasn't non-competitive, but the outcome was not in doubt in the second half. After a week after you toyed with SMU as well.
Yeah, not great for Georgia
Tech. Virginia Tech, fine loss at North Carolina, led a good chunk of the game. Again, the bubble is so weak that like I'm not gonna say that Virginia Tech shouldn't be in the field because over Washington or Arizona or even George Mason because they lost by 5.
Yeah, exactly.
And then every time I start to believe in Florida State, every time, non-competitive Sunday, nearly give up 100 to NC State. It's fine you lose. Don't get blown out at home. That game was at home, right?
Mm-hmm.
Don't get blown out at home, and then don't basically no-show against Louisville. Every time.
Yeah.
You need to convince
nice one for Louisville, though.
It is.
But yeah. I mean, Tanaya Latson showed out 29 points. She always does. But yeah, the rest of the team needs to show up.
The next time I say, maybe Florida State, you just interrupt me and say no. No. That's the ACC. Big Ten. The most surprising result of last night, honestly, was Nebraska doing what it did to Maryland. That was a must-needed win. Nebraska had lost 3 in a row. None of them were bad losses, but all to unranked teams, largely in the 15, 18-point range. And then you're thinking, right, they're going to go to Maryland. Are they suddenly a lot more bubbly than we thought 2 weeks ago? Guess not.
No. Yeah. Also, I think we can say probably goodbye to Maryland's hosting opportunities as well.
Different team.
Yeah, I think that Bree McDaniel injury has just really hurt them, and I think that's going to hurt their seeding even more too, because they look like a different team. Like Kennedy is going to put less weight on those wins when they had her too.
Yeah, I mean, Allie Kubek moved into the starting lineup. Christina Dulce's off the bench. She fouled out in 17 minutes. They got out-rebounded. Maryland, with Dulce, Kubek, Saylor Poffenbarger, they got out-rebounded by 17.
That should not happen.
And, it seemed like
Nebraska, too.
Yeah, Nebraska got on a run in the third quarter, and then it's like they just kind of keeled over.
Mm-hmm.
And, that honestly, it's not even the loss so much that sets off alarm bells. It's just the manner in which they just rolled over and died. It's like, this is like a 5-alarm fire going off in my head of just what's happened to Maryland. Fifth loss in the last 7. Again, all of these losses in a vacuum are fine. It's Texas, Ohio State, UCLA, Illinois, and Nebraska. And Illinois was by 1. All of those are fine defensible losses, but now they're just starting to pile up at a bad time. And one loss, I understand she's your key bench player. One loss does this? Yeah. Maybe we were just too high on them all along. Maybe.
Yeah, and how you finish the season matters too, right? There's no denying that as you get to March. When the committee makes this bracket, there is an emphasis on recent performance. There is a big emphasis on what you do in the conference tournament, but it's also how you finish the regular season. And this is not a trip to the hosting territory for them. They're firmly in the field. Obviously, no question about that, but sure. Hosting is coming off the table very quickly.
Ohio State in overtime over Minnesota. What do you make of the Gophers? They haven't beaten anybody. They're 7-7 now in Big Ten play, and yet 9-point loss at Maryland. They hung around. 5-point loss against Michigan. Hung around with USC. I think they hung around with UCLA for maybe a half, if I'm not mistaken. Nice fourth quarter comeback to force overtime. Is this team how bubbly is Minnesota?
They are on the bubble. I don't think they're last 4 in territory, but they're the next tier above it, last 4 buys. That said, just because we've talked about how weak the bubble is, I feel like it's they've got to lose a lot of games or some bad games to
a 9-loss power conference team in this bubble, in this environment, is not going to miss out.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah. And so I think they're okay.
So 6.
And I think the eye test too is going to help them, right? Overtime against Ohio State, stuff like that will help you too. So they keep hanging around. They're going to be just fine.
If they split Oregon and Washington, they'll beat Purdue. Or they better beat Purdue. And then they close at Michigan State. If they go 2-2 and then pick up a loss in the Big Ten tournament, so that's 10 losses at most.
Yeah,
it's probably even if they don't have a single quad 1 win, they have 2 quad 2 wins. They're probably in fine.
Yeah, I think you start looking at teams that don't have any wins in quad 1 and quad 2 when you get down to the bubble here. So they'll be.
And then one last Big Ten result that stuck out to me Wednesday: Oregon survives in the final seconds against Washington. Oregon, kind of like Nebraska, 3 straight losses. This was where I was going to start my "is there a bubble" conversation, because it seems like if Washington's still in the bubble, I don't mean to harp on the Huskies, like make fun of them. It's just they're 14-11, and they don't really have any meaningful wins, and their net is in the 50s. And the net isn't the end all be all, but it's the most heavily used metric that the selection committee uses. It's like, why are they on the bubble? And I don't know why is like UNLV not.
Yeah.
I guess most people are just putting them in the bracket as the auto bid, but
yeah, they're the auto qualifier, but they like if they're not your auto qualifier, they're absolutely like on the bubble.
So the bubble exists if they're bid stealers, basically.
Yeah.
And if everything goes chalk, they're
yeah.
And then the only other result that, from a bubbly standpoint, Mississippi State no-showed at home against Alabama Sunday. And boy, I was worried about how much did they need that win last week, and very much more concerned Sunday after they got blown out by Alabama. Nice 2 overtime win at Vanderbilt. Make Selection Sunday. That's a comfy win. Make Selection Sunday comfortable win.
Yeah. I think they're pretty comfortably in the field.
Okay, other results before we get to Big 12 talk. Because Tuesday, Baylor beat West Virginia. What the hell did Oklahoma State do to Kansas State? Last week, what do we say? Throw me any outcome, and I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. I lied. There was an outcome that I did a double take and went, what on earth is happening?
Oh, yeah. I feel like at this point, anything, like you said, anything goes with this Oklahoma State team. It truly could be blow out the top team in the conference or lose to the worst team in the conference. And it's like, okay. It's baffling. I don't know what to make of it.
All right, one last result, and then we'll talk more Big 12. LSU over Tennessee. I think it was important for LSU to win when Morrow and Flaugier didn't play that well. Morrow was 4 of 16, Flaugier was 4 of 10. And I know, at the top of the show, I said they're just relying on 3 players. And most nights that is true. I think it's important for them to see that they can win when those 2 players are off.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a big confidence boost for the other players on the team and for people to be able to step up and contribute. I thought that was really good for LSU.
Kalen Gilbert Tennessee really should have called Kalen Gilbert. She's randomly amazing against them. Had 22 points in the game winner in game 1. In the ensuing 7 games, had 25 points total. And then had 23 points on Sunday in the win over the Lady Vols. And then afterwards, she said they were a little, paraphrasing, like, they were a little late to call me. It's like, oh, apparently she took it personally. Nice win for LSU. All right. Big 12. Craziness in the Big 12. We'll catch up with Big 12 analyst Rachel Galligan, whip around the conference. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll notice we're in different clothes. I'm in a different location. Rachel lives in the Mountain Time Zone. Doesn't sit well with our 9 a.m. Eastern recording time. So we chatted yesterday. Let's talk a little Big 12, shall we? If you followed women's basketball for any recent period of time, Rachel Galligan is covering college and the professional ranks about as anyone for a while now. You may know her from Winsider. She also covers now the Big 12 for the conference. She joins us from the Rocky Mountains. Rachel, thanks for joining us. How are you?
Thank you guys for having me. I'm doing good. I'm a little cold out here in Colorado right now, but otherwise I'm doing all right.
Do you get like fake spring at all? Or is it just cold and then it's not?
Yeah, like last week it was 70 degrees and we were out on a patio, like enjoying our day. And next thing you know, it's 1 degree like 2 days later. So yeah, it was a little crazy, just the fluctuations of weather right now. But it's sunny and it usually is in Colorado, so that keeps me sane. That's for sure.
There you go. Big 12. How do you think this league should be viewed from a national perspective? No teams in the top 10, but then 4 inside the top 20. You're likely to get 2 probably schools to host in the tournament, have a number of teams that are just kind of lurking there in that mid-tier range. So nationally, how should this conference be viewed in your opinion?
I'm sure a lot of people would sit here and say I've got a great amount of bias when I'm going to say this. This has been the first year I've really analytically and just as a basketball mind, as an analyst, as a former coach, really studied this league and been a part of it as closely as I have. And I got to be completely honest, I'm so impressed with this conference. And I know in the bigger picture of what we're dealing with right now, like conference realignment, there's a lot of question marks with everything. Like you're still getting used to, teams traveling a certain way. And, from top to bottom, everything's changed. But I can confidently tell you guys that I have been, not surprisingly, but I have been very impressed with this league. I've been impressed with the depth of this league. I think, coming in as an outsider, I don't know that that's a word I would have particularly used in the past. But I think when you look at the top 7, top 8 right now, my opinion is they can go toe to toe with anybody in the country. I think the top half is trending really well. You've got a couple of schools that are really impressive in terms of being older, having veteran players on their team. And that's what everyone in the country is trying to do right now, right? Is get old, have experience, be able to, have players who've been in this type of situation before to make a deep run, and not just in, their conference, but NCAA tournament as well. So I think you've got a lot of experienced teams at the top, older veteran rosters. I also think, you've got a lot of teams that are doing so well at home, entered the week first in winning percentage at home out of any other conference in the country. We at the beginning of the week, we're the only league to have 5 teams, top 15 nationally in scoring margin. K-State, you talk about what K-State's doing, West Virginia's ability to score and turn you over, and all the way down to Oklahoma State, and how impressive they've been at points of this season. So I think, just the overall depth of this league is something that isn't talked about enough. I think it's overlooked, this league, in some ways, shape, or form. And this isn't just me being overly biased. This is my genuine opinion. 12 teams in the top 85 in the net. And I really feel confidently that, you could take a lot of these top programs. They could go toe to toe with anybody in the country any given night.
One of those top programs in the league, TCU, was intriguing in the preseason, but pretty unproven. They beat Notre Dame in November and now have kind of lived in that top 10, top 15 range ever since. Did you expect it to all kind of come together quite like it has for them this year?
That's a good question. It has come together. And I think you have to really credit Mark Campbell and his staff. Yes, you've got a 3-headed monster in Haley Van Lith and Sedona Prince, Madison Connor. So there is some consistency there with Prince and Connor from last year. Then you add an element, an Olympian, and Haley Van Lith to the equation. And I think we all can agree this has been a great move for her, getting to see her a little bit more in her element in a natural position, and kind of that pro system, ball screen type of action that Campbell is going to run there at TCU. Like anything, I think transfer portal era, you're not quite sure what does this really look like. So I think that there was high expectations. I had high expectations, probably like a lot of people. But then you just see the other pieces of this team and everybody's ability to step up and accept their roles. It's more than just those 3 at any given night. I think we've had to see them go through some learning experiences and get battle tested. Like in my mind, I think about that South Carolina loss. That was a pivotal moment, I think, for TCU, understanding that really the only person, in my opinion, who looked really comfortable in that game was Haley Van Lith. How does a Sedona Prince and a Madison Connor, kind of progress together throughout the course of the season and continue, to get comfortable in those high profile games, because it's going to come down to that. So, I guess long story short, yes and no. I felt like this team would be really good offensively. I've been really impressed with them defensively. They're guarding. They've got great schemes. And I think they're coached really well. I think the biggest thing people have to realize about Mark Campbell and his staff is they want to be older. They want to go get talented players who have experience, but they're bringing in people that fit their culture. They're bringing in people that want to fit, kind of their style of play and what makes sense for them. It's going to be interesting, obviously, to see how this team does the rest of the year, but also not thinking too far ahead of myself, how they kind of reload this offseason and still continue to build around that culture with older pieces.
Right, because they're going to lose a bunch after this year.
Yeah.
3 losses for TCU. One of them is to Oklahoma State. Explain the Cowgirls to me. The last month, they've lost at Houston, beaten TCU, scored 37 points total at West Virginia, did what they did last Saturday to Kansas State. Like, this is about as wide of a spectrum as like anyone in the country.
Yes. I would say Oklahoma State, I have watched them like a hawk very, very closely this season, in particular the last 2 months. This is probably one of my favorite teams to follow this season for a lot of reasons. I think the biggest one is it didn't necessarily enter this season with a ton of expectations. They were picked 11th in the preseason. They had Staley Hurd, who as a freshman, played a lot of minutes, was kind of thrown into the fire, but didn't necessarily have this perennial superstar, right? At the national scale that everybody is aware of. And so they kind of walked into this season a little bit of unknown. And I think first thing I want to do is give credit to JC Hoyt and her staff. They were so meticulous in the off season about who they were bringing into their program. And I think the biggest thing about this Oklahoma State team is they all get along very well. They play together very well. Their synergy is really good. They've got a toughness that I think they feed off of from top to bottom, in particular from Staley Hurd, is someone who is, in my opinion, one of the toughest players in the country. And I think what we're seeing is people that understand their roles exceptionally well. A lot of coaches say that. It's a really cliche thing to say. That is truly the case with this team. And I would say they're exceptionally well coached, not just on the offensive end, on both ends of the floor. They are really good at making the extra pass, at making the correct read, of picking apart whatever the defense is going to give you, not just forcing a shot, not just trying to kind of break you down one-on-one. Yes, Staley Hurd can get downhill as well as anyone in the country, but they're so good at creating those kick out shots, those extra passes, which lead to high percentage shots. And so you've got players like Annegret Assi, Staley Hurd, Heward, who can knock down shots and who can get really hot. We've seen them many times this season have games where it's been like video game numbers from the perimeter. And so I think that that's fun to see. But I also think we got to remember that this is a team that, because of those expectations and because in some ways, they are a little bit young, with some of the pieces, including Staley Hurd, just a sophomore. I think that, and even last year, it's not like they had a dominant year. So they're kind of growing up before our eyes. They're understanding what it takes to, 1, win, 2, consistently win, and then win with a target on your back. And then also understand what does it take to kind of respond from a letdown. And so I think those are all kind of very normal, natural learning experiences we see throughout the course of a season, especially out of a team that, does have newer pieces to it, that has kind of re-evolved with who is making up their core and their dynamic. And so I think we've seen we've seen the potential of this team and how good they are. And then we've seen, obviously, some learning experience. I mean, obviously, the first one that comes to mind is that Houston loss. I know that they would love to get that game back. Give them another minute in that game. They probably would have won it with that fourth quarter comeback. But I've just been really impressed with this team. And I think we are watching like the heart and soul of collegiate learning experiences. Every night it's we have lessons we have to learn as a group and as a unit. We know we can be really, really good, but if we don't prepare or carry ourselves a certain way or go about things a certain way, constant back and forth of just lessons with this team. But like you said, that they've been as good as anyone in this league, and we've all seen that.
Definitely. Now, from the K-State side, no Aoka Lee is obviously a gaping absence for this team, similar to last year where she was out a lot of February. How much stock are you putting in their results right now, whether it's the good ones like beating TCU or the bad ones like getting blown out by Oklahoma State, knowing that she's going to be back in a few weeks here?
I think the biggest thing with K-State is they are so talented. There are so many weapons on this team down the line. I mean, yes, Aoka Lee, you can't replace someone like that. You can't expect that even as a unit you can replace what she gives you night in and night out. But what you can do is evolve. And I think they have so many weapons on this team, not just offensively but defensively. Tamara Poindexter, Jalen Glenn, Taryn Sides, who's come on great. You've got Walker. And obviously the play of Serena Sundell, that game versus TCU, that third quarter was just unbelievable. One of the best performances I think we've seen all season long. So I've kind of almost said I don't want to fall shy of saying they're better without Aoka Lee, because that sounds crazy to say. I do think that you have a lot of veterans on this team who they've been together a long time. And Jeff Mittie is such a good coach analytically that they can switch up how they play. And they did it against TCU. They were able to play defensively. And again, this is the best, arguably the best defensive team in the Big 12, one of the top in the country. And that's how they were able to win that game, is they can be a little bit more aggressive on ball screen action, right? They can speed you up. They can play a different type of pace when Lee is not in the game. So yes, we all want to have a Yoka Lee back. And I think that, hopefully within the next, little over a week, she's back and we get a chance to see her at the end of the season in the conference tournament and in March Madness. I think that the loss to Oklahoma State, I think that the win against TCU was completely fair, and I think speaks to how good this team is even without Lee in the rotation. I think the loss against Oklahoma State felt like they walked into a hornet's nest in Stillwater, which is one of the most difficult places to play in the country, in my opinion, against a hungry Oklahoma State team who was was sitting there for an entire week coming off that loss to West Virginia, and they came out like gangbusters, just absolutely on fire from the perimeter. And then I think you have kind of what you see sometimes, a hangover game. And I don't know if they would call it that. I don't know if anyone else would agree with me, but that's kind of what I felt like, is you're coming off such a high of beating the number 9 team in the country. And then you go on the road and it's a really tough environment and it's just like a slog, you just feel a little bit behind, just even their movements felt a little bit of a step behind. And on the other end, Oklahoma State was playing unbelievable. So I'm not putting a ton of stock in that. I think if you're Kansas State, you got to move on from that. You got a quick turnaround. I think this is a big weekend. They're going to play UCF at home, and then they get a 1-day prep and a 1-day travel, basically 1 day to wrap up that game, get on the plane, practice and prepare for West Virginia. And we all know how tough West Virginia is in Morgantown on a Monday game at 1:00. So that's kind of where my mind is at right now. They're going to obviously not be with Lee in that game. So really interesting next few days here for Kansas State. And that's kind of what I'm looking at, is, are they able to go into that type of environment and win that game without her? That's going to tell a lot.
We're talking Big 12 with Rachel Galligan and apparently my cat, if you're watching on YouTube. K-State TC was obviously, a lot of people, I think Megan and I kind of figured the winner would be in the driver's seat in the Big 12. Well, suddenly Baylor has something to say about that. They've won 5 straight. They're balanced. They defend. They rebound. I feel like the ceiling is really high with this team with the talent they have. Am I crazy?
No, not at all. And I think we're all kind of waking up to it right now. It's kind of like this aha moment. I looked at the standings and I'm like, there are literally 3 teams tied at number 1 right now. And I just came back from a trip to Waco watching that Baylor West Virginia game. And that was a big game because they hadn't had that type of ranked quad 1 win. And I think early on in the season, they dropped that game to Oregon. That hurt because I think there was high expectation into the season. They've got the recognition. They've got a lot of talented players. They added a piece in Aronette Vonleh. But let's remember, and I've been doing some looking back just at myself when it comes to this team. Remember, they lost Van Geitenbeek first game of the season. Tears her ACL in the season opener. That's a player that they really expected to be, if not a starter, a major contributor from the point guard position. Then they add Aaliyah Matharu right after Christmas. That's a massive element to just kind of have thrown into the equation midway through the season. That's tough. That takes time for those players to become integrated and play with one another. And then I already mentioned Vonleh. When you add a dominant post presence like Vonleh in the offseason, you can't, and this is part of this transfer portal era, is how do you get all these players to become in sync at the, early on so you can be playing your best basketball. I was talking to Nikki Collin about this. I said, in my opinion, it kind of feels like this team was always going to be, just part of it was circumstantial at the beginning of the season, was always going to need to be a team that was going to click and be playing their best basketball at the right time. And I think we're starting to see it. You've got 5 players averaging double figures. You said it. They can defend. They can rebound. They've got incredible depth offensively. I think their synergy and their confidence with one another is an all-time high. And Bella Fauneroy was saying, every time we walk out on the court as of late, you can just feel our confidence in our closeness getting better and better and growing every single night. They have one of the best offenses in the Big 12. And as we said before, we know they can defend and rebound. And so I think this is a perfect example of what every coach says. We want to be playing our best basketball in mid-February, and we're starting to see it. It's coming together. I think the sky's the limit with this Baylor team. Obviously, there's going to be some big tests coming up. All these Big 12 teams are just going to beat up on each other. But a big one in my mind is the last day of the regular season, March 2nd, against TCU. That's gonna be huge.
Definitely. Do you feel similarly about Utah? I mean, the Utes are now quietly 10-3 in the league, have won 6 in a row after last night. Kennedy McQueen is back.
Yeah.
Feels like we might have dismissed them a little too soon after Lynn Roberts left early in the season.
I agree. I agree. And I mean, everybody I've talked about so far, outside of really TCU, because they don't necessarily have the same longevity as some of the others, Utah has that. And I think McQueen goes out for 5 games, which was their toughest stretch of the conference season. They end up going 2-3 during that stretch. She comes back. They've now won 6 in a row, 5 of those with her in the lineup. I cannot say how big it is to have her back in the rotation. That's a 5th-year guard who is so vital to what they do. She understands their system. She can score it herself. She also, like she's the conductor in what they do offensively. And you could say a few of them are conductors. They're all kind of conductors when they're out there playing together. But I think having this team at full strength, we were a little bit robbed of it, a little bit not having her during that stretch in January. And I think it kind of put us in that, like, okay, we're focused on TCU, Kansas State, and they've just been kind of quietly flying under the radar. And now it's like, okay, they have been receiving votes. I think at one point they were in the top 25. They're taking care of business right now. They're towing that line. I mean, this is, in my opinion, a top 25 team when they're healthy. So yeah, I feel the same way. And I think, again, you have a team that's been together for so long. And yeah, you lose Lynn Roberts, but then you have your associate head coach and Gavin, who just moves right into that equation. And it's like a seamless transition. I think those players have done a phenomenal job of adapting to some of that. That's a massive change, early on in the season. So Utah's scary. They're very scary. They're more than capable of making a deep run in the tournament.
Last team I'll ask you about, Iowa State. Obviously, big preseason expectations. Disappointing start to the year, and they've just kind of lived since then. Maybe the best offensive weapon in the league, Audie Crooks. Can they make a run in March still, do you think?
Yes, I believe so. I think I've analyzed this quite at length here the last couple of months, and I've been asked that question quite a bit. I think there was a little bit of unrealistic expectation with Iowa State going into this season. I think part of that has to do, all of it has to do with the success they had at the end of last year. And that's a credit to them, and when you have success and when you do great things, people are going to they're going to expect you to be able to do that consistently from here on out. This is still the youngest team in the Big 12, one of the youngest teams in the country. Very sophomore driven. Yes, you've got Audie Crooks, who leads the Big 12. She's 6th in the nation in scoring. Addie Brown, she's been really, really good this season. But I not that it's a sophomore slump, because I don't think that's necessarily applicable here, but I think that just as a unit, there was a coming back down to earth from this Iowa State program, and we're still seeing those learning curves. Kind of the same things I was talking about with Oklahoma State, is learning how to win with a target on your back, learning how to win with expectations. Now the word is out about Audie Crooks. They still can't stop her, but it's out. Teams are playing her different. The word is out about Addie Brown and how she plays. And so it's always really difficult that second year, in my opinion, for a sophomore-led class to kind of overcome what happens in year 2. And I think that ultimately is what leads to a sophomore slump. Not that that's what I'm saying this is. I just think that this team, we as media had them at this huge expectation, which in my opinion was a little unrealistic. What I can tell you is you've got Emily Ryan on this roster, top 5 in the nation in assists, one of the greatest in Big 12 history. She's going to lead this team. We know how great this team is when she's on the floor. So you add that dynamic with, Addie Brown, and then a dominant player like Audie Crooks. And we know Bill Fenley, one of the greatest coaches historically in women's basketball, has done a very good job throughout the course of his career of getting his teams to play their best basketball at the right time. That's why we're even having this conversation. They did it last year. So I do think they can make a deep run.
We could ask you about 5 more teams in the Big 12, but been generous with your time. You wear a lot of different hats. Plug your stuff. Where can we find you?
Oh, man. It's a good question. The biggest one is, I think, on X, you guys can find me at Rachel Gal, doing a lot of stuff with Bleacher Report right now, whether it's mock drafts, got a couple coming out here soon. Check out our show on Monday, AP Top 25 show, and then WNBA Weekly on Tuesday. And then obviously a huge shout out to everybody at Winsider. Love working with those guys, and everybody does such a great job. Thank you guys for having me on.
Our thanks to Rachel. That was really good conversation. Megan, we didn't even ask her about, we can go down the list of conference by conference. The Big 12 may not be as top heavy. Like there's 8, 9, like thoroughly entertaining teams with a lot of question marks in both good and bad ways. Just, you never really know what you're going to get.
Yeah, I feel like if you pick one league right now that you're like, I have no idea who's going to win this league, the Big 12 is probably the top of that list.
Yeah, and I like that they play on different nights. Like ACC, SEC largely takes over Thursdays and Sundays. Big 10 just kind of scattered because they have to be because of the travel schedules for these teams. So the Big 12 is like Tuesday, it was a thing. Baylor played West Virginia. Wednesday, the week before, was a thing. Kansas State played TCU. I like that they kind of have their own. Sure, they're on ESPN Plus, which sucks, but another conversation for another time. But they're getting these kind of showcase opportunities that doesn't get lost in the shuffle for the most part. So I like that. Which leads us to a preview of all the things that are happening on Sunday. Not a whole lot going on tomorrow. 2 top 10 games Sunday. Let's start with Texas-LSU. Texas, the talk of the town. They'll be ranked maybe first, probably second, maybe still. They'll be top 3 come Monday. Anissa Morrow is probably the best post player they've seen, but it's largely just her. How does she need to impact the game for LSU?
Yeah, I think on the offensive end, she needs to find a way to keep up with some of Texas's production inside. I think Morrow's defense has gotten a lot better at LSU, but she's still undersized. Like, I just don't think that's the strongest part of her game. So I think really what they need from her inside is to get production on the offensive end and then just try to hold her own on the boards.
Yeah, I think the rebounding aspect is more important than the points. I don't think there are going to be as many points as people might expect from a game that features 2 of the top 8 scoring offenses in the country. Neither one, if you listen to the show, loves to shoot the 3. I think both are going to take care of the ball enough where, like, LSU doesn't want Texas to get out and run and play its pace, but Texas doesn't want LSU to get out and run. So I think it's going to be more half-courty than people will think, so the point total will be a little lower. I'm just wondering if LSU can get the shots they want, because I think they're more dynamic, but it's one thing to be dynamic when you're running into multiple 6'5", 6'6" human beings.
Yeah, it makes it a little bit harder to be dynamic for sure.
Yes. Who you got? This one is in Austin.
I think I'm going to go with Texas here. I think coming off that South Carolina win and Kentucky win, I just think Texas look like they're playing their best basketball right now.
That's fair. We did call on this show last week, Texas over South Carolina. Give me LSU. I want chaos in the SEC. There'd be a 3-way tie for first. I don't know who'd be the 1 seed in that scenario. But give me chaos. The other marquee game, there's actually 3 marquee games Sunday. One get lost in the shuffle in the ACC. South Carolina-UConn. Game day is going to be there. This one has all the hype. I think this is more hype than it is actual chance UConn wins.
Yeah, I'm interested to see if like UConn responds at all to like what went wrong against Tennessee, but agreed. Until I see it from UConn, I'm not sold on the hype on this one.
I mean, if they don't make threes, it's going to be ugly.
Yeah.
If you're looking for a bright spot, again, it's Providence and it's St. John's. These are not world beaters. AZ Fudd finally starting to look good. She hit 8 threes against St. John's on Wednesday.
Yeah.
She doesn't need to make certainly go a long way. She has to make probably 4 or 5 realistically. Mm-hmm. Sarah Strong can get in foul trouble because she's UConn's only post player. Jenna Alouthi is a post player too, but production wise.
Yeah.
And then Paige Beckers, former National Player of the Year, has to show up at some point if they're going to beat South Carolina.
Yeah, and it's not an impossible game. Like, there's a path. What we've seen from UConn so far, I haven't seen it. Like, I just don't see it right now. And like you said, it's St. John's and Providence. But, like, prior to that Tennessee game, we had seen some good things from this UConn team against the likes of that level of Big East competition, and it just did not materialize against Tennessee. So I'll believe it when I see it for UConn is kind of where I'm at right now.
Who's going to stop Mylasia Full-Wiley from getting to the rim? Who stops Joyce Edwards from getting out in transition and just beating everyone down the floor for easy layups?
Yeah.
I think this goes a lot like last year's game in Columbia, where South Carolina was up 15, 18 at the half, and they won by a similar margin. I think I don't see how it's that much different this year, frankly. Honestly, if UConn keeps this, I think, to within single digits, there are no moral victories in Storrs, Connecticut.
Yeah,
I would take that. I would take that and run.
Yeah, I think if UConn keeps this in single digits, a close game down the stretch, like regardless of the fact that they don't win it, I will feel a lot better about where this UConn team is than where I do right now.
So we're both taking South Carolina there. And then the kind of sneakily under the radar, you're right. NC State is just quietly now ranked in the top 10. North Carolina, I feel like just quietly, like they normally live in that teens 20 range. Well, now they're the number 12 team in the country. This is Sunday at 2:00 in Chapel Hill. Before last night, I was going to take NC State all day. They're running into a buzzsaw. A few question marks, but I am curious, this suddenly red-hot NC State offense against this North Carolina defense that is really, really good.
Yeah, it's like a clash of two totally different styles, and that's always makes for a really interesting matchup. And obviously the numbers next to their name add some excitement to it as well. But I just think this is like some of the best of the ACC games we're going to get down the stretch here, and I'm excited for this one. I don't have a strong opinion on who's going to win it. Like I can see it going both ways. I think it goes to whoever's able to play their game a little bit more.
Yeah, if this is a higher scoring game, NC State, if it's a lower grinded out game in the, I don't know, maybe high 50s, that probably favors North Carolina. Isaiah James is she's playing at a different level the last few weeks. And I think she's the difference maker. I don't think North Carolina has that type of difference maker offensively. NC State's quietly, when do they play Notre Dame? They play them soon. Like Notre Dame's 13-0. We all just kind of assume, they're running away with the ACC. They're only a game up on NC State. Now, that could all change Sunday. UNC wins, 2-game lead. It's probably over. It might still be over. I don't know.
Yeah.
But don't count out the Wolfpack quite yet. Fun game Sunday. Tennessee, Ole Miss. About as opposite styles as opposite gets. I mentioned the Rebels may have turned a corner. We'll see how it goes up against, this is a different level of offense than, honestly, I think even Kentucky.
Yeah, this is going to be interesting. Like, as you said, it could not be a more different style with like Tennessee and the threes and the hockey sub lineup changes, and then Ole Miss is just trying to wear you down. I'm interested, like, how effective the wear you down kind of defense is on a team that subs like that, because like you're not on the court for 40 minutes straight trying to play against it. And I wonder if that favors Tennessee just in that, like, if they're able to make some threes and then with the amount they rotate their lineup, like, is that enough to be Ole Miss?
Right. You make it, I was going to say like 5 minutes, but it's not even that long. If you can make it 4 possessions up and down and get us through, you'll get a break.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll get a break for 3 or 4 possessions and go back in and get a break. And that's how it is for 40 minutes for Tennessee. Yeah. So, that's a good point. I didn't really think about that. What's Ole Miss's resume? They're not ranked, so that doesn't help. We have a new, so Ole Miss, they're 17-7.
Yeah.
They have 4 quad 1 wins. They have 7 losses already. So you're teetering on here where you need to do a lot of work. Is this a viable, like, kind of under the radar hosting candidate?
I think so, because they have the quad 1 wins to back it up. And I think we've talked about the bubble being weak, but I think as you get towards the bottom of the hosting group too, like, the quad 1 wins fall off very quickly. So I do think that Ole Miss has an opportunity to get there. I think they have some work to do. Like you said, the 7 losses makes that tough, but there's teams in that group that have, like Tennessee, I think a clear host at this point, and they've got 6.
I got to stop you. I didn't know they closed with South Carolina and at LSU.
Oh yeah. Well, if you win one of those, you've got a shot.
Sure, but then
if
you lose the other, you got 8, and then SEC tournament is 9. You can't put a 9-loss team.
Yeah.
The top 16 host.
I didn't realize what they closed with either.
Neither did I.
Right now they had a shot, but that's a tough way to close.
I know. Yeah, if you win, if you go like 4-1 down the stretch, so you beat South Carolina or LSU, obviously you have to beat Tennessee, and you make a run to like the SEC tournament semis, maybe an 8-loss. Oh, it's still 9 losses. Never mind. Forget it. Sorry, Ole Miss. You're not hosting, which is good because apparently you don't care enough to show up anyways and support your team. UCLA, Michigan State Sunday. If you're Michigan State, how do you feel? Like, do you want to see UCLA? Because, hey, UCLA just turned it over a bunch, and that's what Michigan State does really well. Are you sitting there going, they're going to be angry?
Yeah.
And it's at their place.
Yeah, I don't know. Michigan State, I think I might have preferred that UCLA beat USC before I had to play them because, yeah, the team that just got their first loss of the season, like, they're probably going to be out for blood. Yeah, I think it's just a tough game for Michigan State. Like, Michigan State's good, but
they're just not a great rebounding team, and they don't have an answer for Lauren Betts. They just don't have the bodies for it. Honestly, like, I think they have a better chance of beating USC on Wednesday if they can just create havoc. Can the Trojans avoid the havoc? Because if they just kind of get dragged into it, then there's enough. Like, obviously, the ceiling for USC is clearly national championship caliber high. I feel like their floor, as we saw against Iowa, is just a little bit lower than these top tier of teams. So if Michigan State can just try to make it a track meet with that pressure, get turnovers, maybe force Juju into getting as uncomfortable as Juju can possibly get, maybe you can make it a game.
Yeah, I agree. I think they have a better chance in that one than they do this one. I just don't think, like, the way UCLA is built, it's a good opportunity for Michigan State to pull off an upset.
If you're looking for a fun game Sunday, Illinois, Nebraska, two teams that are pretty safely in, especially after Nebraska won last night. Arizona, TCU, Wildcats running out of time. 11 losses, only have one quad one win. This, though, a win over on Sunday would make things interesting, no?
Yeah, I think, look, I've said it 15 times in the show, but with how weak the bubble is, like, a win like that is something that can put you in.
Yes. And then Columbia, Harvard, round 2. Lions won the first game a few weeks back. This is a quad 2 win for whoever wins. Who needs to win more? Harvard's higher in the net, has a quad 3 loss, and they have a couple of Q1, Q2 wins. Columbia's lower in the net, no losses in Q3, Q4, and technically they have more upper echelon wins than Harvard, but they're lower in the net. So who needs it more?
I think Harvard needs it more. I think that both of these teams are in net territory where their resumes are getting looked at. Right? Like, I think the way I look at the net is it's like a barrier to entry. If your net's too low, like, it's like you're not getting in. But once you're kind of in that group of net teams that resumes are really going to be looked at, like, the resume is what matters. So I think with Columbia right now kind of feeling like they have the better resume, I think Harvard needs it a little bit more.
And what's that range? Is it like, so Harvard's 35, is it low 30s to like mid upper 40s?
Yeah, I would even go as far as like 50, or at least in the conversation.
That's fair. Washington and Arizona are in the conversation then.
Yeah. So I think 35 is plenty fine. Like, they are in a 40 or whatever they are. Like, they're in a fine spot. I don't think they're at risk of like falling out of the net conversation. So it's more about the resume for both of these teams at this point.
Yeah. So a lot of really good games Sunday. Empty your calendar. There's really good games every single night of the week. We're at that time of year. Monday, Notre Dame, Duke, Irish, Duke at Miami, at NC State next Sunday. I think they could lose one of those triangle games, Duke or NC State, maybe, possibly.
Yeah, I mean, if they're gonna lose one, it feels like that's got to be one of those two. Like, those are I would say North Carolina too, but like those two teams are the best of their teams in the ACC. I'm not picking against Notre Dame at this point because, like, we just have not seen them even like come close to losing an ACC game. It feels like they've just been rolling through. But if there was an opportunity for it to happen, I would pick Duke or NC State. I might go NC State over Duke just because I think like the potential for like NC State's guards to kind of go off and match some of the offensive production from Notre Dame.
Duke is interesting. Obviously, they have a defense that's been darn near impenetrable for 6 weeks now, except for the one game where NC State penetrated the crap out of that impenetrable defense and put up nearly 60 points and a half. Notre Dame can obviously do that. I think Duke, they have to keep this game in the high 60s, maybe the low 70s. They just have to play perfect. Like, whatever funk that Reagan Richardson has been in for 2.5 months now needs to find its way out. She's been a non-factor. Her last 16 games, she's averaging fewer than 7 points a game.
Yeah.
And like the biggest games, 3 South Carolina, 5 against North Carolina, 5 against Georgia Tech, 2 points, and she fouled out in 9 minutes against NC State. She needs to be a factor in every game, let alone for them to try to beat Notre Dame in South Bend.
Yeah, exactly. Like you need your best player to be your best player in these types of games to have a chance at winning.
And I mean, she put up 35 against Oklahoma. Now, Oklahoma's defense isn't great, but like she's probably scored 35 points for the month.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then K-State, West Virginia. I can't even start to try to I don't know what's going to happen. West Virginia, though, TikTok. They have a quad 1 win because Oklahoma State moved up enough. So despite losing to Baylor, they do now have a quad 1 win. They have 1 in quad 1, 1 in quad 2, but still their RPI is the net is 13. They have a good record. That means they've taken care of business against the teams they're supposed to take care of business against. I think TikTok. We'll find out on Sunday what the committee thinks, but TikTok to pick up some of these wins to ensure you're hosting.
Yeah, right now I don't have them hosting just because, like, I think even though there's teams that have more losses, like, I just think in that case, like, the top wins way more, and like, West Virginia just doesn't have the wins to justify it at the moment. We'll see what the committee thinks about it, but that's where I stand right now.
As a reminder for those wondering, how big is hosting? Last year, of the 16 teams that hosted, 13 went on to the second weekend. The ones that didn't, Virginia Tech, small asterisk, no Liz Kitley. K-State lost to Colorado, a 4-5 game. And then the only real quote-unquote upset was Duke beating Ohio State. So if you're hosting, it's a big bonus. Try to get to the second weekend. Not having to travel, play in front of your home fans, all that. Speaking of that, Maryland's probably a must-win against Michigan State. Or excuse me, against Michigan to stay in that hosting conversation?
Yeah, I think they're a team that has an uphill battle to stay in it. But at the same time, yeah, a win here would help them. They need to get back on the right track here.
Hey, Megan, what's going to happen in Utah, Oklahoma State on Tuesday?
I'm so nasty. I'll tell you when we see what happens.
Utah, Oklahoma State. It's it's a big joke now that like, sure, whatever is going to happen to Oklahoma State is going to happen. Utah has multiple players with 50, 40, 90 splits. So 50% field goal, 40% from 3, 90% from the free throw line. That happens like, I don't know, handful of times a year across the whole country, and they have multiple players doing it on the same team. That's wild.
That's crazy.
It's wild. Wednesday, USC, Michigan State. Again, we talked about that in Spartans Wreak Havoc. So you have all the action on Sunday. You have a couple of games Monday, Notre Dame, Duke, K-State, West Virginia, Maryland, Michigan. Lone game Tuesday, Utah, Oklahoma State. Lone game Wednesday, USC, Michigan State. Thursday, by Thursday standards, next week's a little bit quiet. Like Georgia Tech, NC State. That's lost a little luster. I'm down on Georgia Tech a little bit. A win would make me a lot less down on Georgia Tech.
Yes. But yeah,
here's a question.
Like NC State's to take.
We'll close with this. Alabama, Tennessee. Give me Alabama's hosting chops. They're 20-5. They're top 20 in the net. They have 4 quad 1 wins. All of their losses are quad 1 losses. Tall task, but if they can get Tennessee and they play Oklahoma, I think they should absolutely host.
Yeah, I think they got to get both of those wins, but they're definitely in the conversation, and I think maybe a team that people aren't really talking about as being part of that conversation, but they're right there. Like I said, the bottom of the hosting group too is like a collection of teams that have a fair amount of losses in some cases, but have the wins to balance it out, or just don't have the wins to really solidify the resume. So there's still a lot of flexibility there, and like you said, good losses. I don't think you need to be in LSU, but like you take care of business against you Auburn, Texas A&M, and then beat Tennessee, Oklahoma, you're certainly gonna be in that mix.
What about Oklahoma? They don't really have any glamour games left. Missouri, Vanderbilt, Arkansas, Florida, Bama, and they already have 6 losses.
Yeah.
So could that Alabama Oklahoma game? There's still work to be done in the SEC tournament, but like, could that be kind of a de facto like winner might host, loser might not?
Very possibly. I think I have Oklahoma in their hosting right now, but they're one of those teams I think on the floor line that's just like kind of hanging on to that spot. So that if Bama wins the Tennessee game, and it could very much come down to, obviously you'll have the SEC tournament after it, but like whoever wins that game flips into the hosting spot for the time being.
It's that time of year. We get our first bracket reveal this Sunday. There's like 5 games left in the regular season. Every day of the week, there are games. Yeah, hope you got, I guess you didn't get your sleep last night because there was a 10 o'clock tip between 2 top 6 teams. Hope you get your sleep tonight. Good thing there's no Pac-12 After Dark anymore. You're going to a concert. You're not even going to sleep tonight, Megan. Megan, I hope you got some sleep Monday through Thursday. You ain't going to do it again until April 7th. Our thanks to Rachel Galligan. That was great stuff with the Big 12. Folks, enjoy all the basketball coming, and we will talk to you next week.